The Champions League phase has concluded, the draw for the knockout rounds as well, and frankly, I've really enjoyed this new format. It's been fantastic. A lot of people agree with that sentiment. Some actually needed to be converted.
I'll say, joking aside, I didn't like the format when it was first introduced, but I think you got to trust the process because this, so far, I've liked it a lot. I didn't think I would. I thought I was going to be stubborn and stick to my ways, but on the final match day that we're here, that we had this Golazo show, this mayhem, I think it was great, and maybe we have to wait and be calm and see how it plays out.
It was a really fun last day. Apparently there were goals going in like every 100 seconds. The live table was the most chaotic and fluid I have ever seen. But with all that said, there's still some haters, some people who didn't like this at the beginning and don't like it now, and basically it'd be impossible to change their minds, no matter how much of a success this seems like it turned out to be. The unfortunate thing for these people is that a lot of their arguments are quite weak, so I'm just gonna go ahead and show you some clips and dismantle every single one. At times, they will do that to themselves, but I think it's important we put some of these arguments completely to bed. Welcome to Campfire Football. I'm Sebastian North. All right, so Dale Johnson, Rob Dawson, Mark Ogden, and James Ollie, all ESPN football writers, they sat down the day before match day 8 to basically just trash the whole new format. But these are flimsy arguments. Oh, and there's one word that they are completely obsessed with.
There's not enough jeopardy.
Let's start with Dale Johnson.
I think one of the problems we've had is that this has been a really long process to get to any type of jeopardy or situation whereby you can get excited about what a result's going to mean.
8 games is not that long. I mean, you don't call the 38-game Premier League season a slog, do you?
The first 4 or 5 rounds of games, they almost felt like exhibition games because no one knew what the league positions meant. No one knew how many points they were really going to need to achieve anything.
I don't understand this point. In exhibition games, you have unlimited subs, there's no VAR, refs are less likely to give red and yellow cards because players aren't going all out because there is no reward or consequence if you win or lose at the end of the game. No one cares. It's a friendly. Here, these games mattered. And if you don't think so,
well, that's just like your opinion, man.
The last thing he mentioned was that it was too hard to work out what the bare minimums would be, how many points you would need to get through and to be in which place. So what? Like, why do you need to know this in advance?
I remember being in Milan playing Arsenal, and we're all sat there going, I don't know what any of this means. And if they lose, well, yeah, they're all right. Arsenal, they've still got time. And
there again, not having certainty is apparently a problem. I mean, here's the thing. If everything is so obvious, then it just becomes boring.
The old format, often in the group stages, you had these easy groups where you could pick exactly who was going to go through and who wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, that was a major issue. Most groups were pretty much all wrapped up by match day 4. The only thing that you were waiting for was to find out who would get third and drop to the Europa League. Now, that doesn't exist. The teams that would have essentially finished third in their prior groups are now just going into another knockout round, but it's seeded. And as we saw from the bracket, it looks pretty good.
And even now, we've got to the point in the last day where if you win a game, you can go up 5 places or down 5 places, but there's not really a huge amount of jeopardy other than a couple of clubs.
The fact that you can go up or down 5 places on a single day is kind of interesting, especially if you can go from automatic qualification to round of 16 or not. Now, I understand there weren't a whole bunch of teams that were facing elimination, and if that's what he wants, fine, just come out and say that.
It doesn't really seem right as if you finish 24th, you go through another challenge. Top 16, bottom 16 go out, top 16 go through. That might be the best way to increase more jeopardy.
But the need to know the meaning of every single match and for all of them to be really important is just unrealistic. But now James Ollie comes in and says something that is just incorrect.
well, if you finish 9th and you finish 24th, you've had very different campaigns. Yeah, you've arguably got the same result,
absolutely.
Effectively.
Yeah, that is simply not true. So Atalanta, who were in the knockout phase until the end there, they finished 9th on 15 points. In 19th position on 13 points, just 2 points fewer, were Feyenoord of Rotterdam, who, had they beaten Lille on the final day, they would have gone all the way ahead of Atalanta. Those are pretty fine margins when you think about it. All right, so here James Ollie's actually going to give us something revealing about what they really don't like about this.
Well, when I go to do these games, we're all the same. You know, the job's about putting the result into context, right? And narrative and all that kind of thing. I've found it very difficult to cover from that point of view in terms of trying to pitch the coverage accurately and not overreact and not kind of make it so dull that basically you're writing 900 words every time of, well, this doesn't really matter, so just come back in 2 weeks and we'll see if it's a bit clearer.
Well, here's what I would say. Get creative. Like, do your job. Like, try to find something interesting within the game as opposed to have to constantly talk about whether or not it's going to lead to them going through or not. But there's also a larger more cynical theme here. You have to remember that the Champions League format was revamped in the wake of the introduction of the Super League, which was dead on arrival.
The only guy to blame for the European Super League is Paul Pogba.
But basically, the big clubs in Europe were like, we need more from this. This competition needs to yield more money. And so UEFA brought them this Swiss model. But because this was urged on by the Super League and the big clubs, it's always going to just seem a little off to these guys.
Do we think that the fact that this has been quite boring?
Dude, you think it's boring, but there's a lot of other people who actually really enjoyed this.
Make people think again about a European Super League even more. Because if we're going to have one big league table, which isn't really very meaningful and there's no real goal behind it.
And the funny thing is, it's like, because it's been a success is the reason why people are less likely to want the Super League. But either way, here, you want to hear Mr. Cynical, the mayor of Cynic Town, it's Mark Ogden.
Well, this could be UEFA's grand plan, couldn't it? This is what you wanted. This is how bad it really is. In a couple of years, we're going to go back to what you had before because it's much more exciting. As we know, it's not about excitement anymore. The owners don't care about excitement. They want the money, don't they? And that's the whole point of this format, that more games, more revenue, more everything, less excitement.
Bold claim to make, less excitement. And there's no one in the studio with them saying, well, I found it pretty exciting. And that's why they're able to just go on and be like, yeah, see, it sucks. It's a dump. It's a slog. It's not even exciting. What's hilarious is that as they continue to talk, they just start contradicting themselves.
This has been great for clubs like Celtic, are always knocking on the door in the Champions League and in the group stage. They haven't been out of it for a long time, but they've qualified now for the knockout stage, which is great for Celtic, great for Scottish football.
I mean, isn't that hilarious? Like, first he says, you know, it's actually been pretty good for clubs like Celtic, the small clubs, you know, giving them a little bit of a chance.
It's just the bigger clubs, ironically, the ones that we'd expect to coast through, have struggled. I mean, you know, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Man City, PSG, they're all going into this last round of games, not certain of a top 8 place, never mind not certain of a place at all.
Isn't that what you want? I mean, it's hilarious. Like, they always complain that the big clubs get everything they want, and here you got 3 struggling.
It's one of the biggest changes actually for the analysts, because in the old format, you had 3 opponents. You'd obviously play home and away. And now they've got more opponents. There's more work to do.
Once again, he brings up the work issue. Like, oh, it's a lot of work for these analysts. But then, just listen to this.
He was sort of suggesting that maybe that's part of the reason why you're seeing 1 or 2 more upsets and maybe games with more goals in them, because there's just not the same amount of time for the analysts to do the opponent work that they would normally do to shut down teams and nullify threats.
So let me get this straight. More upsets, games with more goals equals bad?
What the hell did you just say?
And not only that, we're supposed to feel bad for the analysts who can't come up with plans
to shut down teams and nullify threats.
Like, that is a proper self-own right there. Like, what do you want? Do you want boring games because the analysts all figured out the perfect game plan? Or do you want them to be in a scramble, not be able to do as thorough as a job as normal, and so we have less predictable games, less predictable outcomes, more goals? It's like literally everything you want, and you're complaining about it. Okay, so then here Rob Dawson goes and says something basically just a day too early.
Because if they have some massive ties in the playoff round in the last 16, that may make people look at it and think, well, it was all worth it. You've got Real Madrid versus Bayern Munich or something over 2 legs of perhaps a game that you wouldn't see until the semi-final usually. You get it in February, which would make people, would bring that excitement, wouldn't it?
I mean, clairvoyance from this guy. He saw it coming. And yeah, that is exactly the point. That is so much more exciting. It's just rich. And actually, these guys doubled down in an article that was released on ESPN, some of the things that they said. James Ollie called it a money grab by UEFA that diluted the group stage jeopardy to the point it was hard to know what any of it really meant until near the end. Rob Dawson say, personally, I'm not a fan. There's nothing wrong with trying to revamp the format, but I'm not sure adding loads more games was the answer. And then he goes on to say more statement matches are welcome because fans want to see Man City versus PSG, Liverpool against Real Madrid. Yeah, that's what fans want to see. You're just looking at this entirely from your own writer's perspective, which is fair, but it does not represent the rest of us at all. Beth Lindop said the new format has been a little bit of a slog. Dale Johnson, same thing. It's early days, but I reckon it's fair to say the bigger clubs didn't really enjoy the slog. They all admit the old format was not ideal. Well, here's the thing. There is no perfect format for anything. There's always going to be downsides. The key is that the competition just has a solid meritocracy, competitiveness to find a winner, and that overall there's a good amount of excitement the whole way through. And I think this Champions League new format did exactly that. As we've seen, the knockout rounds are going to be tasty. So tell me what you think about the new format. Either way, it's not going anywhere anytime soon, and I'm happy for that.
Next season, the top 16 go through, the bottom 16 go out, and then that'll be a real sense of jeopardy on the big clubs that struggle.
Thanks for stopping by. I'm Sebastian North. This is Campfire Football. Take it easy.